So think about your absolute favorite pastimes for a second. Picture yourself out in a park with a group of friends.
Mm.
The weather is perfect. You are, running until your lungs actively burn, dodging behind trees, playing just a massive, exhausting game of tag. Is that a game?
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Most of you listening will probably say yes, obviously. But now, change the scene. Picture yourself sitting at a computer in a quiet room, carefully zoning residential and commercial districts in SimCity.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
managing local taxes. You are building roads. You are, I don't know, occasionally responding to a random alien invasion.
As you do.
Yeah, as you do.
Yeah.
But there is no actual win state. You don't, beat SimCity. You just play until you decide to stop. So is SimCity a game? Or is it just a digital terrarium?
See, that is the ultimate boundary question in interactive design. I mean,
Right.
where exactly does a boundless simulation or a toy end and an actual game begin? We use the word game so casually in our everyday language, but when you look under the hood, there is a very specific anatomy at work. A structure that dictates how we interact with these systems.
Exactly. And that is our mission for today's deep dive. We are going to break down the actual anatomy of a game. We're exploring the 4 essential elements that separate a structured game from a simple digital toy or simulation.
Right.
And for you listening, our sources for this deep dive include course modules from the Game Beyond, some really great extra credits case studies, and insights from various game design lectures. So, okay, let's unpack this, starting with the core definition.
Let's do it.
At its absolute foundational level, a game is defined as the voluntary participation in a system of rules and goals.
And what's fascinating here is that before we can even begin to dissect the mechanical gears and wires of a game, the rules, the goals, the points, we first have to understand the psychological space where games actually happen.
The headspace.
Right. Why do we willingly choose to play at all? To understand this, we have to talk about a concept coined by the cultural theorist Johann Huizinga in the late 1930s. It's called the magic circle.
The magic circle. I've heard this term thrown around in design circles, but how does it actually function? In practice?
Well, the magic circle isn't a physical boundary, right? It is a conceptual and social agreement. It's this contract between the designer and the player and between the players themselves.
Okay.
When you step inside the circle, you are agreeing that the normal rules of reality no longer apply, or at least they're temporarily suspended. Inside the space, failure is safe. The rules of the game completely override real-world logic.
Right. It's almost like stepping onto a theatrical stage.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Because if you're just standing in a room, a carved piece of wood is just a piece of wood. But the moment you step onto the stage of a chessboard, that wood is a knight, and it has the power to put a king in check. The physical object hasn't changed its atomic structure, but the meaning we assign to it has changed entirely, just because we all agreed to step into that circle together.
Precisely. And the rules we agree to inside that circle often highlight the sheer absurdity of play when viewed from the outside.
What do you mean by absurdity?
Well, take a 200-meter track race. Every runner's goal is to get from the starting line to the finish line before everyone else, right?
Yeah.
If we apply strict real-world efficiency to this problem, running all the way around the curved track in a designated lane is a terrible strategy.
Right.
The most efficient way to win would just be to cut straight across the grassy infield and physically tackle anyone taking the long way around.
Yeah. Or think about golf. If your ultimate goal is to get a tiny white ball into a small hole hundreds of yards away, the most logical, efficient thing to do is put the ball in your pocket, walk over to the hole, and just drop it in.
Exactly. But we don't do that.
No, we definitely don't.
We don't, because the essence of the magic circle is our willingness to accept unnecessary obstacles.
Unnecessary obstacles.
Yeah. We voluntarily agree to make the path harder by requiring the runner to stay in their lane, or requiring the golfer to use an awkward metal club to move the ball, because overcoming those arbitrary constraints is where the meaning and the fun actually live.
Wait, let me push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
I completely understand the safe space of a casual golf game. But what if I'm playing a highly competitive game for millions of dollars in a massive esports tournament?
Okay, high stakes.
Yeah, the real-world consequences there are massive. We're talking about careers, money, sponsorships. Does the magic circle still exist when the stakes are that high? Or does the real-world pressure break it?
See, that is a brilliant distinction, but the stakes actually reinforce the circle rather than break it.
Really?
Yeah. The money and the career are real-world outcomes, yes, But those outcomes are entirely dependent on everyone strictly adhering to the arbitrary rules inside the circle.
Ah, I see.
If an esports player decides to literally unplug their opponent's computer to win $1 million, they are applying real-world logic to solve the problem. But they would be instantly disqualified because they shattered the magic circle. The stakes only have value because the circle is maintained.
Wow, okay, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Which brings up a huge question for you, the listener. Why do we willingly sign up for this? Why do we voluntarily take on this work of overcoming arbitrary constraints, especially when it offers no direct real-world survival value?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really comes down to a concept called cognitive surplus.
Cognitive surplus.
Yeah, as human beings in the modern world, we possess massive amounts of unused creative and intellectual energy. Our survival no longer requires us to hunt and gather for 14 hours a day, right?
Right.
So games provide a highly structured, emotionally rewarding way to apply that leftover energy toward a shared goal.
And there's a really famous, fascinating historical precedent for this in our sources involving a project called Fold It, right?
Yes. Fold It is the ultimate proof of cognitive surplus in action. So for 15 years, the scientific and medical communities had been struggling to decipher the exact 3D structure of an enzyme related to the reproduction of the HIV virus.
15 years.
Yeah, a decade and a half. It was a massive, incredibly complex spatial puzzle. Computers were failing because they were just using brute force algorithms, trying every possible combination one by one, which would take centuries.
But the human brain isn't a brute force machine. We are, highly evolved for pattern recognition and spatial intuition.
Exactly. So researchers at the University of Washington did something brilliant. They translated this dense mathematical biochemistry problem into a 3D spatial puzzle game.
They made it a game.
They called it Fold It, and they released it to the public. They didn't ask people to do biochem homework. They asked them to manipulate 3D shapes on a screen for points.
Now, the players, gamers, who are just playing a spatial puzzle for high scores, solved the structure of that enzyme in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. A problem that stumped supercomputers and PhDs for 15 years. I mean, explain how that is even possible from a design perspective.
It works because when players choose to invest their time into a game, they're actively choosing engagement over passive consumption.
Right.
The designers of Fold It tapped into our natural human desire to organize, solve, and optimize. They provided immediate visual feedback when a player made a quote-unquote good fold in the protein. When a game's structure aligns perfectly with our natural cognitive wiring, participation isn't a chore.
It becomes joyful.
Exactly. They voluntarily poured their cognitive surplus into the system.
So, if the magic circle is the psychological agreement that gets us in the door, and our cognitive surplus is the fuel we bring with us, what actually keeps us engaged once we are inside?
That's the next step.
Because a boundless sandbox is fun for a few minutes, but human nature craves friction. We need to look at what exactly separates a wide-open digital toy from a structured game.
This is a crucial distinction. A toy is an object or a system that allows for interaction, but it lacks a defined goal. A game, on the other hand, requires structured conflict and a clear objective.
The perfect modern example of this from the sources is Minecraft.
Oh, yeah?
If you boot up Minecraft in creative mode, you have infinite resources, you can fly, you can't die, and you can build whatever you want. That is a digital toy.
A very popular toy.
It's an incredible toy, like an infinite box of digital Legos. But it's not a game because there is no friction.
Yeah.
There is no goal you're trying to achieve against a system that is pushing back.
But the moment you switch that exact same software into survival mode, where you have to, punch trees to gather wood, monitor a depleting hunger meter, and survive the night against exploding monsters, you have added constraints, rules, and a goal.
Right.
You have transformed the toy into a game. Goals are the compass of the interactive experience.
And good game design relies heavily on layered goals, doesn't it? It's rarely just one massive objective like save the universe.
No, that would be overwhelming.
Right. It's micro goals. It's jump over this specific pit, which teaches you the mechanics you need to defeat this regional mini-boss, which ultimately gives you the tools to save the universe. The short-term goals are breadcrumbs guiding the player toward long-term mastery.
And those goals, both short and long-term, are bound by rules. But if we want to understand the anatomy of a game, we have to break rules down into two distinct categories.
Yeah.
Inside-the-box rules and outside-the-box rules. Inside-the-box rules are the explicit, hard-coded rules written into the system. In a video game, it's the physics of gravity, or the exact amount of damage a sword does.
The code itself.
Right. But outside-the-box rules are the implicit, unspoken social contracts between the players interacting with that system.
And there's a brilliant real-world example of this explicit versus implicit rule clash in the course modules involving the Swedish postal system.
Yes, this is fascinating. The Swedish Post had a highly optimized, explicit set of rules for how mail was supposed to be sorted at the facility and delivered on the streets. On a manager's spreadsheet, this explicit system looked perfect. It mathematically calculated the shortest possible distance for a worker to walk.
But the map is not the territory.
Exactly. The spreadsheet logic completely failed to account for the physical reality of the job. It didn't account for steep hills or the agonizing weight of the mail bags in the first half of the route or, the harsh winter weather.
Right.
The explicit system was deeply flawed in practice, making the job physically exhausting and miserable for the workers.
So what did the postal workers actually do? They created their own unofficial house rules.
Yep.
They hacked the broken explicit system by forming implicit social agreements among themselves.
Yeah.
They might swap parts of a route or sort the mail in a way that technically violated company policy but made the physical carrying of the bags bearable. They optimized the reality of the route, not the theory of it.
Fix the system.
Yeah. But here's where it gets really interesting. If players, or in this case postal workers, are just making up their own house rules and blatantly ignoring the explicit design of the system, isn't that just cheating?
Well, that's the immediate assumption from anyone managing a system, right? But when we look closely at player psychology, the anger directed at cheaters rarely stems from them breaking the hard-coded explicit rules. The real outrage happens when a player violates the implicit social contract.
Give me an example of that in a game setting. Like, how does that look?
Okay, think of a casual fighting game between friends on a couch.
Okay.
The explicit rules of the software might technically allow a player to trap their opponent in a corner and just use the same low kick move endlessly until they win.
Ugh, the worst.
Right. The code allows it. But if you do that, your friends are going to be furious. You haven't broken the game's code, but you broke the trust. You violated the implicit outside-the-box rule that says, hey, we are here to test our skills against each other and have fun, not exploit a glitch.
That makes total sense.
And more importantly, when designers see players creating these workarounds or house rules, it usually reveals exactly what is broken in the core design.
So the players are actively trying to fix the system to protect the magic circle. They are patching the game socially because the mechanical code failed them.
Precisely.
Now, once you have these rules and goals established and players are acting within them, there has to be a mechanism that responds. Because a static system isn't a game. If I press a button and nothing happens, the illusion dies. The system has to talk back.
And this brings us to the pulse of play feedback loops. Feedback is how the game communicates progress, failure, and consequence. It's a continuous conversational cycle. The player takes an action, the system evaluates that action and responds. That response gives the player new information, and the player uses that information to make their next choice.
And these loops come in two distinct flavors, right? Positive feedback loops and negative feedback loops. And it's important to note for everyone listening that positive and negative in systems design don't mean good and bad.
Correct. A positive feedback loop is a reinforcing loop. An action leads to a result that encourages more of the same action.
The best analogy for this isn't a snowball rolling down a hill, it's compound interest in a bank account.
Oh, absolutely.
In a game, let's say a strategy game, if you secure an early gold mine, you get more money. You use that money to build a bigger army, which allows you to capture 2 more gold mines, which gives you even more money. The early advantage mathematically compounds.
And in a single-player game, becoming an unstoppable economic god is incredibly fun.
Totally.
Yeah.
But in a multiplayer game, that compound interest locks out latecomers. If the winner mathematically cannot be caught after the first 10 minutes, the losers will just put down their controllers and walk away.
Which is exactly why systems desperately need negative feedback loops, which are balancing loops. In a negative loop, an action leads to an opposite reaction, specifically designed to stabilize the system and introduce friction.
If you're playing Mario Kart with your friends, you know the exact feeling of the ultimate negative feedback loop, the blue shell.
It is the perfect illustration of balancing mechanics. The blue shell is an item explicitly designed to target the player currently in first place. It is a severe obstacle introduced by the system to stop the leader's momentum and allow the players in the back of the pack to catch up.
I always used to hate the blue shell. It felt so unfair.
Yeah.
But looking at it through the lens of systems design, I realize that negative feedback isn't a punishment at all. It's a vital guardrail.
Yes.
It keeps the pack tight. It ensures that the race remains a tense competition until the very last second. Without it, the player in first place would just get bored, and the players in last place would just give up.
Exactly. The system is artificially maintaining the tension required for the magic circle to function. And when you take these feedback loops to their logical, modern conclusion, you arrive at what game designers call cybernetic systems.
Cybernetic systems.
Yeah. These are games that function almost like a living organism. They don't just respond statically.
Oh, yeah.
They self-regulate based on real-time data input from the player.
Like adaptive AI. Walk me through how that actually works under the hood. How does a game know I'm struggling?
Well, a cybernetic system constantly measures output variables. It tracks how long you spend in a specific zone, how much damage you've taken, and your accuracy.
Okay.
Let's say the code notices you have died 5 times in a row in the exact same room on level 3, and your accuracy has dropped by 40%. The system's algorithms measure that data, calculate that your frustration level is likely peaking, and take autonomous action.
Wow. It's fascinating to realize that what feels like a stroke of luck, finding a crucial health pack right when I'm about to die, is actually a cold, calculated mathematical adjustment by the system.
Precisely. The system might subtly adjust the enemy spawn rate down by 10%, or ensure the next crate you break contains health instead of ammo. It constantly, invisibly adjusts the environment variables to keep you in a state of flow.
Flow.
That perfect psychological balance between challenge and skill. Too hard and you quit from frustration. Too easy and you quit from boredom. The cybernetic system rides that razor's edge.
Okay, so we've just spent all this time meticulously building this definition. A game needs the psychological safety of the magic circle. It needs voluntary participation driven by cognitive surplus. It needs explicit and implicit rules, layered goals, and a pulse of positive and negative cybernetic feedback loops.
We have. It's a very robust mechanical anatomy.
But there is a massive counter-argument to everything we just built, and it's a question we have to ask. What if obsessing over this strict 4-pillar definition of a game is actually a trap?
Ah, yes.
What if rigidly defining these boundaries is stifling innovation in how we interact with digital media?
This raises an important question that is heavily debated in modern design circles, and the Extra Credits case study hits on this perfectly. The question, what is a game, is often used as a smokescreen.
A smokescreen.
Yes. It's used by traditional hardcore players as a way to gatekeep the medium. They use strict definitions of rules, failure states, and mechanical feedback loops to dismiss new, artistic, experimental experiences that don't involve jumping on enemies or shooting weapons.
Right. If an experience doesn't have a traditional game over screen or a health bar, a vocal part of the community will sneer and say, well, that's not a real game. That's just a walking simulator.
Exactly.
You see this with interactive narratives like the Stanley Parable or experimental flash games like Loneliness. These are experiences that might completely lack deep mechanical systems or clear win states.
Let's look at Loneliness as an example of why mechanics aren't everything. From a programming standpoint, it is incredibly simple. You control a single black square on a white screen.
Okay.
As you approach other black squares, they slowly drift away from you. There is no score, there are no levels to beat, there is no cybernetic AI adjusting the difficulty. By our strict mechanical definition, you might argue it's closer to a digital toy than a game.
But the emotional impact of playing it is undeniable.
And that impact is achieved through something far more fundamental than complex rules.
Volition.
Yes. Volition is the player's capacity for fundamental choice within an interactive space. Remember our discussion about cognitive surplus. Players are bringing their own emotional state and mental energy into the system. Even with those incredibly simple mechanics in Loneliness, players exhibit volition in wildly different ways.
I've actually seen this. Some players will aggressively chase the other squares, charging into the crowds, almost playing the role of a punk rock outcast who wants to scatter everyone and doesn't care about being rejected.
Right.
But other players, feeling the emotional sting of the squares moving away, will choose to actively avoid the crowds altogether, moving their square along the very edge of the screen to protect themselves from digital rejection.
They are fundamentally changing the narrative and the emotional resonance of the experience simply by how they choose to exercise their volition. The mechanics are bare bones, but the psychological projection is profound.
So what does this all mean? If the strict definition of a game is just an intellectual version of chasing our own tails, are we wasting our time trying to perfectly categorize toys versus games. Is volition actually the ultimate underlying rule of all interactive media?
It's a tension every designer and critic has to navigate. Definitions, understanding rules, goals, and feedback loops are incredibly useful tools. They are the grammar of the medium. They help us understand how systems function mathematically and how to guide player behavior. But definitions become actively harmful the moment they prevent us from experiencing the true power of the medium. The ability to use volition, to make choices and face consequences within a safe space, is a profound tool for examining the human condition. If we dismiss an experience just because it doesn't fit neatly into our anatomy of a game checklist, we limit our own capacity to learn and feel.
I think that is an incredibly powerful place to land. So let's recap this journey for you. We started by stepping into the magic circle, that unspoken social contract where we agree that the arbitrary rules of play override the logical rules of reality. We learned to distinguish boundless digital toys from structured games by adding the friction of rules and goals. We felt the pulse of the system through positive and negative feedback loops, learning to appreciate the dreaded blue shell as a great equalizer.
A necessary evil.
Right. And finally, we challenged our own strict definitions, learning to embrace player volition as the true heart of interactive experiences.
And why does any of this matter to you, the listener, if you aren't sitting down to code a video game today? It matters because you are interacting with these exact systems every single day of your life.
Yes, the anatomy of a game is everywhere.
Think about it. Your health app giving you a digital badge for walking 10,000 steps. That is a positive feedback loop layered with a short-term goal to harness your cognitive surplus. The unspoken office culture that dictates how fast you should reply to a Slack message on a weekend. Those are the implicit outside-the-box rules, the algorithms dictating what you see on your social media feed. Those are cybernetic systems, tracking your dwell time and click-through rates, making calculated adjustments to maximize your engagement flow.
It's like seeing an invisible architectural grid that has been built over our daily routines.
It really is.
Once you understand the anatomy of a game, you start seeing the mechanics that are silently guiding your real-world behavior, your habits, and your purchases.
Yeah.
And most importantly, you realize you have the volition to decide how you want to play within that grid.
Yes.
If you want to dive deeper and actually start mapping out the systems in your own life or maybe design your own, you need to download the Game Anatomy Worksheet. It's available right now on the school site at school.thegamebeyond.com. It will completely change how you view the apps and systems you use every single day.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought based on what we've unpacked today. We've seen how the boundaries of the magic circle safely separate play from the serious consequences of reality.
Right.
But look around. From our gamified fitness trackers, to the implicit house rules of our corporate jobs, to the endless feedback loops of likes and retweets on our social media. Every system in our modern world is increasingly relying on layered goals and point systems to guide our behavior.
Which brings us right back to where we started. Whether you're running from a friend in the park or zoning a digital city, you're submitting to a system. So ask yourself, as these mechanics bleed further into our daily lives, at what point do all these overlapping gamified systems finally merge?
At what point does our actual reality just become one giant, unavoidable magic circle?
Wow. Think about that one. We'll see you next time.
Do you want to learn more about game design? Try our game design course. Go from learning the basics to becoming a master game designer. No coding skills needed. Taught by award-winning game designer Gabe Mack, this course is filled with hours of videos, puzzles, tools and exercises to turn you into a serious game designer. Why are you waiting to harness the power of play? Visit school.thegamebeyond.com to sign up today.